Hello, everybody. Welcome to my official first episode on YouTube. So I'm hosting this live to watch a couple of podcasts. Of course, I had a busy day. If you follow me on Facebook, I had a busy day going crazy. Uh, it's my day off, and I had a lot of things to do. And then, of course, my kid threw in the park. She's been wanting the park for a while, so we did that today. And then we got a chance to buy a couple of things from the grocery store. We are struggling, so we got a couple of things that we needed. And then, of course, came home, made cookies, and now I'm hosting a live. So what had happened was, while I was out and about, I took a peek at YouTube and I saw that Ian Carroll, who I love, he is just amazing, has no filter, and I love it. He's got common sense, and I love that too. So I can really appreciate that man. Of course, I appreciate Candace Owens as well, but there's quite a few people on the YouTube platform that I actually do appreciate, that have a lot of sense, that make a lot of sense, and that I think people miss out on because they're not necessarily on Facebook. And a lot of my people are on Facebook. I don't really do TikTok. I don't really know if they're on TikTok or X, but I don't really use those platforms. So YouTube is my go-to for almost everything. And then, of course, a little bit of whatever's on social media, because that keeps me up to date with the shenanigans of the lovely government that we have. So Ian had something to say, and that really struck me because he does usually point out a lot of things, just like Candace does, but Candace focuses a little bit on somebody else now. And so I haven't watched her, but I have watched a little bit of what Ian had to say today. And then, of course, I saw that Jessee Michels has another interview with Spielberg, and I would love to see what he says, if he says anything different. Of course, I am still very open and skeptical, but we'll see if he has anything new to say. I've heard enough from the disclosure, folks that are out there in the public, and I would love to know if there's anything else that Spielberg can share to kind of enlighten us on what he really does know and what in the movie is actually true versus fiction, or fact versus fiction. But anyways, while we're in this live today, I am going to go ahead. As everyone knows, I've been struggling personally. Just life happens, and husband's been out of work for 4 months. So of course everybody's struggling around here, and of course I am the head of household here in Tennessee. So I've got my daughter, my niece, and my mom that I take care of. Of course, the full-time job is just not cutting it. So anyways, we're doing a giveaway today. So anybody that joins and then, of course, donates at least $5, you get your choice of a free card deck. So that one's the good karma. So everybody could use a little bit of good karma. And then, of course, we have the Sleep Easy. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that has trouble sleeping. And then, of course, if you're doubting yourself lately, hey, I think we all are. So if you're doubting yourself and you need some reminders on a daily basis that you've got this, babe, you've got this. So I've got a few more. And of course, if you join, you donate, you enter into a raffle or giveaway. No purchase outside of your donation is necessary. Shipping is included. Stress less. If you're stressing, hey, who isn't stressing nowadays? So if you need a few reminders to kind of help you relax and just kind of take it easy, because, it happens to all of us, but we can get through it. And then, of course, mindful meditation for those that are learning about meditation. Meditation is a really good practice to kind of help us reset and ground and kind of come to terms with some of our feelings that are obviously there for a reason. So I am a big fan of meditation, and I think that everyone should employ that tool. Very similar to prayer. If you're a praying person. And then we've got chakra cards. I don't know how many of you actually know anything about your chakras, but I am into mental health and spiritual development, and this has been a really good toolkit for me to learn about my chakras and different things that I could do. It even includes a little bit of information on, I believe it's the oils that you can use, what those chakras correspond to, what they can help you release. And, I just think that everybody should be aware. I mean, doctors are very aware of your chakra centers. And so they use that for whatever reason. They use it in the medical field to kind of, decipher some of these illnesses that we have that are kind of like mystery illnesses. And a lot of it is just stuck energy. So there's my weird fact of the day. Your chakras are super important. They have a lot to do with your ability to, for example, have strong boundaries, speak your mind, even have compassion for others and for yourself. So, developing our heart chakra is really good for that. Your root chakra is really good for boundaries and feeling that, that stability in your life. So, there's just a couple of things there. And that just comes from my weird knowledge of my meditation certification or meditation teacher certification. And then, of course, aromatherapy is another one that I've also been certified in and I love because it's helped me heal from a lot of things. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and get started. Done with my shenanigans for now. Thank you for tuning in. And just stay tuned because I'm going to post links for you to be able to donate, support the channel. And of course, if you want to purchase these, you're welcome to purchase the card decks. I do have them available for purchase on my website, thrivevibes.com. Again, thrivevibes.com. So feel free to purchase that there or any other items that you may see. I have incense bundles as well, Palo Santo incense sticks, and then Palo Santo bundles as well as sage bundles. So 3 in a pack for the sage, an ounce of the Palo Santo chunks. They're assorted. And then, of course, a 10 pack of the incense sticks. But anyway, stick around. We are going to get started. We're going to watch Ian first. Let me get there. All right, so this is my first official live on YouTube. I am not a professional by any means, so please be forgiving of my production skills. I'll do my best. I hate commercials too.
And I gave her till 5 p.m. Friday to respond, and 1 p.m. Friday it was announced she was resigning. I don't know anything beyond that connection, honestly. She says, it seems like been diagnosed with a serious cancer and he's receiving treatment, and that's what she said she was leaving to do to support him. So, the timing may be coincidental. I honestly don't know.
This dude is way too soft and fucking professional. She said it's because her husband has cancer. That's a tragedy. Don't attack cancer. Don't fucking attack the cancer. I know, Gigi, it's not good form to say she's lying about that. But the fact that you ask for her to comment on the story about her fucking cult master by 5 p.m. on Friday, and then that Friday afternoon she announces that she's resigning. Right, bro. It's a fucking coincidence. That's what we call a coincidence, Gigi.
Conspiracy theories are entering a dangerous
Information is the oxygen of the democracy.
There's so much evidence out there that even if less than 1% is true, that'd be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.
Tulsi Gabbard's in a cult, guys. Not only did Tulsi Gabbard grow up in a cult, this crazy story just dropped that basically exposes communications, probably almost certainly 100%, between Tulsi Gabbard and the cult leader, all the way up till today, where she's like literally explicitly taking orders from him. Verbatim repeating talking points from her cult leader. It's super wild. It's crazy. It's crazy. I did not see this coming. We literally just were reporting on Tulsi Gabbard releasing the Fauci files and how it just felt too little, too late. Like, cool, thank you, but I feel like you're an op. Like, why do I feel so fucking underwhelmed by this being so meaningless and impotent? I almost feel like you're a plant. Like, I feel like you are deep state, Tulsi, and you were supposed to not be the deep state. You were supposed to be a good person. And to be fair, there were smart people sounding the alarm on Tulsi. Maybe this is just another example, another learning lesson for myself, my naive little self, that I should always be forming my own opinions only from my own research, my own understanding of my own documented things that I can show and prove about people, which is what we should all be doing. It's just hard to do because everyone's got an opinion, and it's easy to either want to be pessimistic or want to be optimistic or want to hate someone or want to love someone based on what other people have told you. And, you can do all that. But when you form those opinions, you might not realize that motherfucker is in a cult and they're taking orders from a psycho cult leader that may or may not have mind controlled you or brainwashed you or something. Because, and to be clear, to clarify, getting carried away, this reporting we're going to look at does not explicitly claim that Tulsi Gabbard was brainwashed and controlled. But I personally, in my personal opinion and read of the story, that's the fucking first thing I'm thinking of that come into my mind. And you'll see when we get into the types of language that is used in these private communications, him to her, it's the exact kind of language that abusers use with their victims that handlers use with their victims. It's super weird, and we're going to get into it right now. It's been known actually for quite some time that Tulsi Gabbard did kind of grow up in sort of weird little cult situation. It was downplayed for sure. They tried to kind of smooth it over and pretend it wasn't, so, but it's not like that was brand new. I just didn't know about it. This new reporting really changes everyone's whole perspective on the whole situation. I'm going to start where I started this morning with Breaking Points doing a piece on, and Crystal Ball interviewing the guy that actually wrote the report, which is awesome because I don't trust mainstream reporting. And especially right after Gabbard has released the Fauci files, we should all be a little skeptical of stories that fucking are not good for her, because it could be that the deep state is trying to do weird hickeys to try to discredit her on the heels of her going after them. That should be your first instinct. That was my first instinct. Seeing this dude on talk about the journalism helps me to judge him as a human, as I see him as a somewhat autistic, awkward leftist that is genuinely doing as a real person. He just seems like he's genuinely doing his job. But aside from that, the timing is, because it basically looks like to me, I mean, it's like, you tell me, but like basically they went to Tulsi's office for comment saying, hey, we're about to run this story. Do you want to comment? We need a comment by the end of the day. I think Friday it was. And then a couple hours later, Tulsi announced that she was resigning. We'll get into it, but you can't make this shit up. It's like, we don't know that that's why Tulsi is resigning, but we kind of know that that's why. I kind of know that that's probably allegedly why Tulsi is resigning.
A new extraordinary report in the Washington Post details just how much Tulsi Gabbard, especially in the early days of her political career, used the verbatim talking points that came from her cult leader guru. This is a Washington Post report by John Swain. We can put this up on the screen. The headline here is Tulsi Gabbard, her guru, and the mysterious messages that helped shape her political career. And the journalist who tracked all of this down in an extraordinary investigation, John Swain, joins us now. John, welcome. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So this is the story of how you came across all of these memos being exchanged is incredible. The content of the memos themselves is extraordinary. So why don't we start with the backstory here of how you stumbled upon this story, how into it, and were able to come up with this treasure trove of communications?
Sure. So there had been good coverage in recent years about the fact that Tulsi Gabbard grew up in this faith group, the Science of Identity Foundation. But there was this sort of centristry of whether that mattered and what, if any, influence her guru, Chris Butler, who's the leader of the group, had on her and on her politics. And so when she was nominated to be Director of National Intelligence, by Donald Trump, we at the Post decided we should try and answer that question. And I looked into it in November 2024. I went to Hawaii. I tried to speak with people and kind of struck out. I got pretty much nowhere. No one wanted to talk. I got asked to leave the street where the guru lives by the police. And I kind of had to move on. And 9 months later, someone from the group, a member of the group who I'd spoken with originally and had sort of played down the importance of the group and the importance of the guru to Tulsi Gabbard, she got back in touch. Her name's Rebecca Salzberg, and she basically told me, I didn't give you the full story last time. And over the course of weeks, she told me how she had actually worked very closely with Tulsi Gabbard on her campaigns and had worked for and with the guru. She'd had meetings with him and spoken with him. And to cut a long story short, some questions asked her prompted her to log into an old Gmail account that she had. And in that inbox, remarkably, were hundreds of memos which documented advice, guidance, directives, talking points to Tulsi Gabbard from the years when she was in Congress.
Now, the pushback that came from...
So you get the idea. You can watch the whole Breaking Point segment to judge the situation for yourself, to judge him for yourself. And to be clear, this is new reporting. Take it all with a grain of salt. So this is the actual piece by John Swain, who we were just watching on the interview. And it obviously all hinges on this Rebecca Salzberg person. Don't know who that is. And this trove of emails that they have verified. I have not personally seen. I can't vet it. At least I don't think I can vet it. I'm going to try to dig in more and see if I can. But, take it with a grain of salt. But what they're alleging, the story they're telling, is pretty fucking funny, even just on its surface, even just if you read it through. And it has very interesting implications if a version of it is true. About cult networks, but about grooming future members of the club, grooming the sorts of people that will become ODNI, that'll become CIA director, that'll become president. How do these people get selected? Who does give them their talking points? Maybe this is just some random Hawaiian cult leader who's really good at king making or queen making or whatever you want to call it. Or maybe there's something else going on here, because if this is true, this fucking smells. This smells like the network. This smells like a far deeper conspiracy of some form. I don't know. I mean, I'm a conspiracy guy. Okay. We'll let the journalists do their mainstream media reporting thing, and I will get out the tinfoil and fucking turn on the microwave. So the Salzburg person apparently worked on digital strategy for several of Gabbard's congressional campaigns. The religious leader's name is Chris Butler, and he's got this breakaway Hare Krishna group that Tulsi Gabbard actually grew up inside of. Her parents held senior positions in the organization. Salzburg said that she herself had been a member since moving to Hawaii with a college friend in the 90s. To me, it's giving intelligence agency cell. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. It's probably not. It's probably just some random fucking cult leader. But it's just too coincidental, dude. It's too coincidental. So some former members, however, have called the group a cult and said disciples were isolated from the outside world, characterizing the group, or those are characterizations that the group has denied. For devotees have been telling the journalists for weeks that Butler, the leader, controlled his followers' major life decisions and demanded total obedience and secrecy. They said he spent years working to extend his reach into politics, and they suspected Gabbard's rise in Washington was the culmination of that effort. Just little, details to note. The story includes a teenage runaway who allegedly was abused by a parent associated with the group. So we've got child abuse within a cult-like environment involved in the story. Allegedly, this Salzburg lady was somehow arrested for trying to give shelter to this teenage kids. It's a whole mess there. So these emails that show all of this that include all this crazy language, that include him giving, or someone giving her direct instructions and also telling her she's worthless and fucking sucks at life, they all come from this 9 Isles account, 9isles.com, which apparently is an email domain used by Butler's office. So it's reserved for his secretaries and select disciples, and himself, apparently. Salzburg said that the source, Salzburg, said that she herself had received emails from 9 Isles addresses when she worked on Gabbard's campaigns. So when she logs back into this old Gmail account, she found hundreds of emails from her SIF days, many from 9 Isles accounts, and she shared some with the journalist, with the reporter. Dozens of attached memos appeared to doc directives and advice for Gabbard from her time in Congress. Some contain instructions on what legislation she should propose, which policies she should embrace, and how she should conduct on television. They had an air of authority. A memo about a proposal to partition war-torn Iraq into 3 states quoted an unnamed person as saying it was time for TG to come up with this idea. And the journalist then cross-referenced a whole bunch of these directions and sort of directives, I guess, and found that just example after example after example of basically Tulsi Gabbard receiving instructions from this account, this email, and then doing them in Congress, proposing bills and voting in certain ways and literally saying verbatim quotes on live TV, sorts of things. But then there's this language in there where some of the language was harshly critical. One memo I found from January of 2015 contained a derisive assessment of a statement Gabbard was to give response to President Barack Obama's annual address to Congress. Quote, this is from the email: "In the first place, nobody gives a shit what you think about his State of the Union speech unless you're going to say something of interest. You're not even trying. You've become really intellectually lazy." In another email, Gabbard was described as chicken shit and mealy-mouthed on her comments on a policy proposal. I noticed that Gabbard, for the most part, was not listed as a recipient of these emails, though many went to people around her, including her parents. The attached memos appeared to be transcripts, often fragmentary, of spoken remarks or conversations. Some of the memos had file names that included, quote, like call with TG and attributed remarks to Gabbard, while in others, the spoken remarks referred to Gabbard in third person. But the main speaker in each memo, the person who appeared to be issuing directives and sometimes castigating Gabbard, wasn't named. There was simply no attribution or mention of who they were. So there is technically, at the end of the story, and the journalist acknowledges this, there is a seed of doubt. They don't know for sure who was writing all these memos and instructions and stuff like that. But they did a pretty fucking good job of triangulating it to like almost certainly be the cult leader. And you can read the whole report for their methodology and all that. I just find this interesting. The journalist asked Salzberg, the source, about who was writing these memos and these saying all this mean shit about Tulsi Gabbard. And Salzberg seemed amused. She says, it was Butler, of course. No one else could speak to Gabbard like that, she added. She said the memos were unattributed precisely to Mass Butler's identity if they ever became public. She's like, okay, very, I guess, cultish, but all very intelligence operation-ish. But it's just interesting that allegedly Salzberg says that only Butler could speak to her like that. Does the cult leader, does this guy speak to everybody like that? Because I don't know how much you know about child grooming and abuse and just like MK Ultra, Manchurian Candidate shit, but that kind of like subtle, subliminal, abusive, derisive language is often the hallmark of sort of a long-standing abusive relationship. And often when the abuse has sort of been internalized, and obviously I don't know what happened with Tulsi's past, I'm not making allegations, I'm just saying that I'm seeing a pattern that's similar to this other thing. It's just my opinion. And when a person has been abused, especially in childhood, and internalized that and has a victim relationship with their abuser, harsh language like that can sort of be a trigger into that like submissive, abused state as sort of a tool of manipulation that extends throughout life and is much more permissible than like physical violence and can be wielded in sort of the same way to sort of trigger that abused mindset, exert control and stuff. It's just weird. It's just weird. I don't know shit about Tulsi. Don't know about her past. Don't know what's real, but it's weird. It's pretty weird. And then she just winds up in charge of the entire spy apparatus of America. And then the Epstein files get covered up and nothing happens. Just don't ask too many questions. Eventually, the files ran to more than 25,000 pages, including hundreds of memos reflecting guidance for Gabbard between 2011 and 2017, most from her first 2 terms in Congress. Then, separately, they realized that a bunch of the members of this cult who were also who were receiving these memos were also separately involved in an effort to make fake social media accounts.
Fun fact, I could never be a politician because I don't check my emails. I just 9,440 unchecked emails. And I'm pretty sure only 10 of them are bills. So those are the only ones that I'll be checking. But no, I could never. Let's continue.
To boost and defend Gabbard online to sort of, so like they were kind of like farming their members to like Twitter farm fake bot support for Tulsi Gabbard, which is cute and funny. I'm just imagining a whole bunch of people in Hawaii like sat around on little desks like, yay, Tulsi. Mahalo, bitches. But just as one example of the sort of direct correlation between instructions in these memos and Tulsi Gabbard taking action as a congressman, this is just one example in the article. I compared the contents of the memos against Gabbard's record in the House, and I found unmistakable parallels. The main speaker, as in like the author of the memos, in a 2014 memo, pressed for her to propose legislation penalizing countries with citizens who had fought for the Islamic State and to issue a statement about it. Quote, "Get it started in the morning," the person said. "You need to be the leader in this regard. Don't dick around." There's that language.
Here's a common misconception.
There's that language again. I found that Gabbard released a statement the following day, and a week after that, she introduced a bill in the House. She's like, what the fuck, bro? I guess some Congress people have APAC handlers, and some people have Hawaiian cult leaders handling them. Like, what is this story, dude? Then there's this video example of her basically using the same exact wording from one of the memos. I think it'll actually put it on screen for us.
The issue about me saying, boo-hoo, I'm going to miss the party.
So it shows that memo talking point, as in the memo that she received, it said to use the talking point. It's not a, quote, boo-hoo, I don't get to go to the party situation, Wolf. And then on CNN, she said, the issue here is not about me saying, boo-hoo, I'm going to miss the party, which is pretty clear framing. And no congressperson is getting on live TV and saying the word boo-hoo randomly. That's a pretty clear hook that the memo is coming out of the mouth on that one. And they do astutely point out that, you could consider Tulsi Gabbard to be quite the shapeshifter in American politics, which is, a fair way to put it, being that her career trajectory took her from a socially conservative Democrat to a progressive darling, Bernie Sanders ally, presidential hopeful, right? Remember that? And then to Fox News contributor, MAGA Republican, and eventually Trump's top intelligence official, a role that granted her access to some of the nation's most sensitive secrets. So yes, it has been quite a ride to get Tulsi where she was yesterday, I guess, so to speak. We're not going to get into all the details of the cult in this video, if I get really into the story. But he does a history of forming cults since the 70s and political aspirations that go way back. Cult members saying that they would literally kill themselves for if he asked them to in the day, apparently. This is not his first foray into actual political endeavors, independence for godly government. They had candidates. This is the cult leader guy, a good-looking dude, no soul in the eyes. I still need to do more research into her parents' history with the organization. They held senior positions. Her mom, she was the secretary for the organization. Her dad was in it. So there's a whole bunch more here that I don't know about yet. A lot of it's in this reporting, but there's a lot more to go into that's probably pretty fucking interesting and maybe super fucking suspicious. I'll dig into it and see what we can find. But I just thought this was too fun, too timely to not pop open right now. So it is always a good sign too. Just pointing out that when a story about leaks shows you some of the leaks, that is critical. It's very important. If you're telling me that you have a bunch of emails and you're not showing them to me, I get suspicious. And they do have some of the emails published right in here, which is a huge plus in my book. Obviously, it doesn't prove all of the emails true or exist or whatever, but it's a huge benefit. And I suspect that the emails are probably real and they probably do exist. I mean, it literally comes down to dictating tweets, what to say, when to post them, videos to link in them, and then bam, there's the tweet. She was a little late on it, to be fair. Maybe the time zone was off. And there's the video link right there. It's awkward.
It's a terrible tragedy that must be investigated very carefully, objectively, and thoroughly to make sure that nothing like this is ever allowed to happen again. That's really all I can say. There's a lot of questions that have...
Yeah, that's pretty much verbatim. So in March, the journalist wrote detailed Butler, Gabbard, and Khomeini, basically the people involved in the story, made players outlining the memos that he had, and what he'd been told about them, basically just outlining the story, asking for comment, right? And neither Gabbard nor her spokeswoman answered his questions. Instead, the spokesman urged me to drop the story. Quote, I can't and Wa Post readers who injured yet another incredible big attack on the DNI's faith. That is a clear deflection. They wrote back again saying many embedded premises and characterizations that we do not accept, but never specified what it was that they did not accept. Hindu phobia. Anti-Hindu religious bigotry. That's all this is. Sorry, but there's only one religion that gets to do the phobia word, and it ain't Hindus. You picked the wrong team, or at least you put on the wrong hat. Maybe you should pick different allies next time. Although, to be clear, I am not convinced that we're not looking at the same deep state apparatus. I am not convinced that this is just some lone cult leader in Hawaii spreading Hindu cult. That is very suspicious to me. But yeah, Hindu phobia, that's not going to slide. And so maybe to wrap the story up, we'll come back to the Breaking Points interview, because the way this guy describes the timing at the end here is pretty fucking funny.
A whole load of questions again and said, we're probably going to go ahead with this. We would like your responses. And I gave her till 5 p.m. Friday to respond. And 1 p.m. Friday, it was announced she was resigning. I don't know anything beyond that connection, honestly. She says, it seems like her husband
I don't know anything beyond that. Honestly, like, this dude is way too soft and fucking professional. Goddamn liberal, dude. Like, I know he's got a job in the mainstream. He's got to be all whatever. He's got to follow the rules. And the rules are, she said it's because her husband has cancer. That's a tragedy. Don't attack cancer. Don't fucking attack the cancer. I know, Gigi, it's not good form to say she's lying about that. And, you know, no one is saying that her husband doesn't have cancer. No one's saying that doesn't exist. It's relevant. The fact that you asked for her to comment on a story about her fucking cult master by 5 p.m. on Friday, and then that Friday afternoon she announces that she's resigning, and I was just like, I don't know. Maybe it's a coincidence. Right. It's a fucking coincidence. That we call a coincidence, Gigi.
Was diagnosed with a serious cancer, and he's receiving treatment, and that's what she said she was leaving to do to support him. So, you know, the timing may be coincidental. I honestly don't know. In terms of the timing, yeah, it is a tough thing in journalism where you try and get the story out as soon as you can. It has to be ready. And, you know, to be honest, in March, when I first went to...
So, around 17 companies.
It's a coincidence. Maybe the timing is just all a coincidence. Hey, Gigi. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Gigi, that it's 15 minutes past your dinner time and you're fucking butting in to the video like an entitled biatch. I suspect. So, that's the story about Tulsi Gabbard's weird cult master leader, allegedly, that was apparently saying her all of her political talking points and pushing her all the way to the top. And I'm sure that don't look at any of the other weird cults like the Moon Cult. Don't look at any of the other weird political kingmakers that have really weird, sketchy, dubious past. Don't examine how these people get to where they are and then slither out of the spotlight the moment that they get exposed. It's all a little too convenient. It's a little uncomfortable. I'll admit, I did not know this. I didn't know this about Tulsi Gabbard, but I could have. That's the thing. That's the lesson, is I could have known this. We did know before the 2026 election, and even long before that, we did know that she grew up in this weird... It was a little less clear before the story came out what it was, allegedly. But I could have known. If I were my own due diligence on this lady, maybe I would have dug it up. But she didn't have my to-do list in terms of who I was suspicious of and what I was worried about, which is foolish in hindsight. But lessons learned. You live and you learn. Don't take other people's word for who someone is. Read the reporting for yourself. Do the investigation for yourself. And double check that reporting for yourself too.
So important to fact check people. I definitely agree with him on that. We should be doing our due diligence. Let's switch over to our next video.
Fauci files and how it just felt too little, too late. Like, cool, thank you. But why do I feel like you're an op? Like, why do I feel so fucking underwhelmed by this being so meaningless and impotent? I almost feel like you're a plant. Like, I feel like you are the deep state told. You were supposed to not be the deep state. You were supposed to be a good person. And to be fair, there were smart people sounding the alarm on Tulsi. Maybe this is just another example.
Let's go ahead and move on to our next video, which is going to be Spielberg and Jessee Michels. Bear with just making that change real quick. And here we go.
There's something going on that's not being disclosed to us.
As you probably know, if you don't live under a rock, Steven Spielberg just dropped Disclosure Day, his magnum opus, alien movie to end all alien movies. The bookend to a career exploring the unknown and portraying it wondrously for global audiences. The Hollywood legend is no stranger to movies about extraterrestrials. From Firelight, a movie he made at the age of 17 for $500, a group of scientists as they investigate a series of strange abductions in their small Arizona town, to the legendary Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where civilian contactees and a group of elite researchers are led through synchronicities to convert Devil's Tower in Wyoming for a face-to-face meeting with Days. To E.T., where a lovable shipwrecked little alien is given shelter by a band of some kids. To the cold machines, lifeless invaders raining terror on an urban New York landscape in the War of the Worlds. To this, Disclosure Day, perhaps the capstone to them all, and maybe the most mystical and esoteric of Spielberg's long list of alien movies, if I do say so myself. Spielberg's interest in UFOs isn't new, and it's not superficial. In fact, he cast J. Allen Hynek, the chief astronomer of the Air Force's Project Blue Book, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he portrayed Hynek's assistant, the French godfather of modern UFO research, Jacques Vallée, casting the legendary Francois Truffaut to play him.
You were the person that Steven Spielberg modeled a character of a UFO researcher on in his classic movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Famed UFO documentarian James Fox revealed a letter that Spielberg had sent regarding his 2009 documentary, I Know What I Saw. In the letter, Spielberg praised the film, stating, "With great curiosity, I watched the documentary you sent over and found it compelling. Personally, I would like to think we are not alone, and even though I have devoted a generous percentage of my movies to extraterrestrial-related themes, I, for one, have never seen a UFO." At that time, in 2009, Fox was operating on a shoestring budget. UFO documentaries weren't really a thing, and Spielberg took the time to call his movie compelling. My point is, Spielberg genuinely loves UFOs. He's not a fair weather going with the tides or riding off the modern surge of interest.
I mean, the movie for me is a summation of my life in science fiction, which has started when I was 17 years old.
Now, if you listen to Spielberg's interviews about Disclosure Day, you might be familiar with this narrative. He had 5 ideas for movies he wanted to make at this juncture in his life. He's now mostly spending time with family and just enjoying himself. And this concept, Disclosure Day, just happened to keep nagging at him. It rose above the rest organically. Yes, he was also inspired by Leslie Kean's New York Times article in 2017 about the 2004 Nimitz incident with Commander David Fravor and his Navy crew seeing a Tic Tac UFO off the coast of San Diego. It also included details about the existence of Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's UFO program named OSAP that ran from 2007 to 2012. And finally, Spielberg notes as inspiration all of these whistleblowers coming out over the last decade saying not only are UFOs real, but in many cases, they've seen first-hand evidence of them. So Steven started taking notes in his notes app, he hit up his longtime writing partner David Kopp, and magic ensued. But you, the audience, might be wondering, is the timing of this movie literally concurrent with sequential data dumps of UFO evidence from the Department of War really just a pure coincidence? At South by Southwest, when asked if we are in fact alone, Steven caveated his answer with this: "I only know what you know. I have no access to special information." But Tobe Hooper, the director of Poltergeist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and a close contact of Spielberg's, apparently said this.
So we're sitting there, and all the producers, Bryce, everyone else is kind of talking, and I said to him, "So Tobe, you're finally going to have one up on Steven, because no, he's very competitive with his buddy Steven Spielberg." And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you're going to be the first one to put a crop circle on film." And he hasn't done that yet. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm never going to beat Steven in that category." And I go, "What do you mean? Why?" And he goes, after Jaws, he was like really big deal. And he apparently he got approached by some guys from Naval Intelligence or something. And they came and offered him a deal. And
did he actually say Naval Intelligence?
Yes, he did.
Oh, he did. All right. Wow.
And
okay.
And he took it. And he got all sorts of information. I mean, Close Encounters is based on a true story. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, I mean, E.T. too. Like, he got access to a bunch of really, like, interesting case files and stuff.
And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
And President Ronald Reagan, during a showing of E.T. to high-level national security personnel at the White House, apparently said this as relayed to us by Spielberg himself.
And he said, I want to thank you for bringing E.T. to the White House. We really enjoyed your movie. And then he looked around the room and he said, and there are a number of people in this room who know that everything on that screen is absolutely true. And he said it without smiling. And everybody laughed, by the way. The whole room laughed because he presented it like a joke, but he wasn't smiling as he said it.
Accordingly, there's a long history of Easter eggs, little hints of UFO truths dropped by Spielberg that are way ahead of their time in all of his movies. He shows crates in Close Encounters of the Third Kind with the names Lockheed and TRW, two likely active legacy UFO crash retrieval programs at the time of the movie's making. In the movie, Richard Dreyfuss even gets a sunburn due to UV damage when he comes into close contact with a UFO. That's probably the first time the wider public has heard anything about electromagnetic radiation damage or burns from a UFO encounter. But now the UFO whistleblowers we listen to most are talking about this all the time.
Well, that sounds like visible band light being blue shifted into ultraviolet, and you're getting literally a sunburn.
The tones played to make alien contact at Devil's Tower in Wyoming were probably directly inspired by Ethership, a musical duo in the 70s which pioneered sonic xenolinguistics and performance art ensemble. Basically, they used sound and light to attempt communication with non-human extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, in the face of it, this might sound like a bunch of hippies who've done too much LSD and have lost their mind. But the group was contacted by Valerie Ransone, who was an intelligence operative during the Nixon years, connected at the highest levels of government. Ransone really wanted to use her work to attempt official extra contact through a growing field at the time called semiotics. Ransone was also coordinating with Jacques Vallée on this effort. Again, Jacques is depicted by Truffaut as this eccentric French scientist literally on Devil's Tower trying to make contact with aliens through different musical tones. So this whole Ethership saga sounds a lot like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if you ask me. I just found out that E.T. may also have been loosely based on a true story from the 70s.
The E.T. thing, we haven't done the episode yet, but we're going to do a whole episode. It's actually based on a true story.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Kentucky.
Well, that's what got it started.
That's what got it started. That was the impetus. A family found an alien on a farm and they hid it in their barn and the whole thing. It was a movie called Night Skies, which he was developing as a producer.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and it was communicating with a kid who was autistic.
Recall the plot. There's a symbiotic connection between E.T. and Elliot, the little boy that takes him in. Their behaviors perfectly mirror one another. When E.T. drinks a beer, Elliot gets drunk at school. When E.T. gets ill, Elliot's body mimics the decline. In fact, they have to sever their connection when E.T.'s health goes downhill, so Elliot can survive. This mimicking phenomena is remarkably similar to how crash retrieval operators explain their relationship to the crafts they encounter. It's almost as if the crafts they're coming into contact with awaken feelings deep inside of them. Just listen to the experience of Jake Barber.
I felt that there was something conscious about the craft during the recovery process that had tapped into me and was disruptive in the most beautiful way in my ability to operate a helicopter, and almost led to me punching this craft off and creating a whole nother crash site like in between where I picked it up and dropped it off.
Finally, we can't forget that Spielberg produced Back to the Future, a movie directed by Robert Zemeckis, the legendary filmmaker behind Contact. The movie involves time travel, and perhaps not coincidentally, the wacky scientist who discovers time travel is named Emmett, 2 T's, Brown, Thomas Townsend Brown, an obscure yet legendary inventor. Notorious, but only in certain intelligence circles at the time the movie was made. Brown was responsible for the famous Philadelphia experiment in the early 40s. He also thought that he had unlocked time travel with his gravity manipulation technology. If you think that's far-fetched, then you have to realize that gravity and time are very interrelated in general relativity. And you also have to deal with the fact that we have an FBI document saying that Brown was deeper than anyone in the Navy on radar. You see, the wacky scientist from Back to the Future, Doc Brown, was also Townsend Brown's nickname. His time and gravity manipulation experiments involved high voltage capacitors. Doc's time travel machine that he invented was called a flux capacitor. The house in the movie is in Pasadena, where Townsend Brown lived and his original lab was for many years. And Doc Brown back in time from 1985, the year Townsend died, to 1955, the year Brown proved his experiments. I spoke to Brown's daughter directly, who is sure that the character is based on him.
You're the only one that knows that, so I congratulate you.
So you tell me if all of that's a coincidence. Spielberg and Zemeckis also hint at the fact in the movie that aliens might actually just a popular modern meme, and it's really all a cover for time travel. When Marty McFly uses the DeLorean time machine to go back in time, it crashes into a family's house, the Peabodys. Their youngest child, Sherman Peabody, points at the DeLorean and shouts that it's a flying saucer. He thinks Marty in his radiation suit is an alien who's come from space. He's holding a comic in his hand about space aliens, implying that he's been primed or conditioned to believe that anything anomalous is from outer space. Once Marty McFly was back in the 50s, he also needed to ensure that he wouldn't alter timeline too drastically. He needed his father George to end up with his mom Lorraine so he wouldn't disappear in the future. That's a classic physics paradox around time travel. So he decides to sneak into George, his father's bedroom at night while George is asleep. Wearing his radiation suit and playing a loud, distorted Van Halen tape, he poses as an alien. Calling himself Darth Vader for planet Vulcan, Marty threatens his father George and says that he must take Lorraine to the dance or face dire consequences. The disorienting music and the costume terrify George into compliance. The implication being that aliens are really just future human time travelers, showing up in the way that will impact us most. And in the 50s, that form happened to be UFOs and space aliens. Spielberg apparently also privately told Deadpool creator Robert Liefeld that aliens were time travelers, and implied that again in an interview with Stephen Colbert.
What if they're not from an advanced civilization 300 million light years from here? But what if it's us 500,000 years in the future, and they know something that we don't quite know?
And then you have a little-known story of the official Hollywood CIA liaison, Chase Brandon, who operated publicly as the agency's Hollywood point person for a decade, helping on movies like The Recruit, The Sum of All Fears, Meet the Parents, and The Bourne Identity. Brandon had worked in black operations for decades, even training at the legendary farm. He knew the ropes, could help Hollywood directors write about intelligence in a less armchair way, probably shape the narrative, and plant Easter eggs, hide truth in fiction.
Websites you're
Now, Brandon started his gig shaping perception in 1996, the year that Men in Black did most of its filming. They needed to rework the plot before it was released a year later. Here's the kicker. Chase Brandon, official Hollywood CIA liaison, was cousins with Men in Black co-star Tommy Lee Jones. Men in Black was made by Amblin Entertainment, Spielberg's production outfit. As you know, take UFO seriously, the Men in Black are a very real, consistent phenomenon where tall, nondescript, and sometimes alien-looking men in black attire try to collect and suppress UFO sightings, wreckage, or truths. For really large-scale UFO flyovers or crashes, they almost always show up on. So maybe, just maybe, I'm speculating here, Tommy Lee Jones hit up his cousin Chase Brandon, the brand new official Hollywood CIA point person, for advice. Jones himself is no stranger to the intelligence world. He played the only person to ever get prosecuted in connection with the JFK assassination, Clay Shaw, in Oliver Stone's JFK. Now is probably a good time to be super clear. I don't know how connected Spielberg is with intelligence, and I'm not knocking him at all as a filmmaker or calling him some deep state plant.
I'm not a plant of the Pentagon or the government or any deep state contracting company.
I think his filmmaking is a gift to humanity. Everyone covering UFOs, and I mean everyone, has some intelligence contacts or uses some information from intelligence. It's a main conduit of information about this stuff, however you look at it. I see UFO content creators all the time act extremely irreverent about the intelligence world, and then proceed to state something as fact that they were clearly fed from intel sources. If you're trying to discuss the government's relationship to UFOs, of course some of your sources are going to come from the government. Having said that, I do think context matters, and the whole "I wrote this movie on my notes" app might not be the full picture. And accordingly, I think Spielberg dropped some deep, hardcore truths in Disclosure Day that maybe weren't completely based on open source research. And the fact that he might be connected should just make you want to search for those truths harder. So without further ado, let's unpack the bombshell truths Spielberg hid in this movie. For his indelible contributions to the field, let's make him this week's American alchemist, Steven Spielberg.
I'm taking a quick potty break. If you need one, go ahead and take one now. I'm going to leave that music playing, and we're going to get back into it real soon. About a minute, I promise. I'll be right back. Okay, let's get back into it.
First, spoiler alert, here's the basic premise. There's a shadowy government-linked corporation called Vortex, and they're sitting on the single Brit in human history. Aliens are real, they've been here for decades, and they come in peace. Vortex isn't the government, their own government. Almost like a breakaway chain of command, far more powerful than our civilian elected leaders. The company has suppressed the scientific break that have arisen from the alien presence, everything to themselves to maintain their technological superiority. That is until one of their own breaks ranks. Enter Hugo Wakefield, a former Works higher-up turned defector, a kind of soothsayer who decides the world deserves the truth. He hatches a plan to dump decades evidence into the open all at once.
There will be no day like tomorrow.
His unlikely accomplice is an extremely intelligent cybersecurity guy named Daniel, played by Josh O'Connor. Daniel ends up sprinting across the country, going on a run with proof of aliens literally stuffed in his backpack. I'm talking videos in bodies and cryonic chambers and hospitals, crash retrievals, the whole nine, along with an alien artifact called the device that enhances the telepathic powers of anyone. So Daniel is on the run, taking this damning evidence with him. Wardex's lawyer is hot on his heels, hunting him every step of the way. In parallel, there's Kansas City news anchor Margaret Fairchild, played by Emily Blunt, who spontaneously starts speaking Russian in her apartment with her confused boyfriend.
Since when do you speak Korean?
Speak Korean? What?
She also seems to know things about random strangers.
Not FBI.
It's like dormant psychic powers have been activated inside of her. It gets that when she goes live to do the weather at work one day, she loses the ability to speak altogether and starts making alien clicking noises, freaking out her colleagues and garnering the attention of Vortex, who confirms that clicking noises are ill-documented alien language, and she's somehow connected to Daniel in some primordial, inexplicable way. Daniel sees the viral clip of her on-air clicking noises and understands the language immediately. So Margaret and Daniel aren't just messengers, they've got strange, unsettling powers that might be the actual key to making contact with whatever's up there. They each have one half of the puzzle. Hugo Wakefield is pulling the strings at a higher level. He's somehow able to call each of them perfectly, right in the nick of time, engineer their interactions and narrow escapes from Vortex. And while these two are running for their lives, the rest of the world starts to crack. Corporate titans, scientists, TV networks, even nuns wrestling with their faith, all at war over one impossible question. When the universe turns out to be way bigger than your God, your government, or your worldview ever admitted, does humanity come together or unravel and fall apart? Throw in World War III anxieties, crop circles, real historical UFO crashes and lore, and a final shot of a UFO descending out of the clouds straight out of Close Encounters. And Spielberg basically ties a beautiful bow on all of the movies he started making back in the 70s. Okay, so what about any of this is possibly real? Well, I think a lot of it. Vortex operates a lot like the real UFO legacy crash retrieval program. Vortex is located in Northern Virginia. This is also the site of Gray Fox, an elite of the elite reconnaissance unit for the United States Army. Gray Fox is not its own independent program, but rather one of the many historical top-secret cover names for a Tier 1 unit within the Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC, officially known as the U.S. Army Intelligence Support Activity, or ISA. Within the military and intelligence community, the unit is most commonly referred to simply as the Activity, or Task Force Orange. The unit is so deeply embedded in Northern Virginia, again, the location of Vortex in Disclosure Day, that one of the unit's most famous insider nicknames is the Army of Northern Virginia. This is exactly how they function. JSOC, or the Joint Special Operations Command, is the umbrella headquarters that controls America's elite special mission units. Delta Force is the direct action assault unit under JSOC, basically the door kickers. The Activity, or Gray Fox, is JSOC's dedicated intelligence unit, providing the signals intercepts, human intelligence, and on-the-ground target finding that tell Delta and SEAL Team 6 where to go and who to hit. Gray Fox is often first on the scene, knowing things about sensitive people and areas before anyone else. Again, we have some parallels here. Vortex stands for Watch, Recon, Develop, and Extract. They were forged from failure, born in the ashes of the disastrous 1980 Iran hostage rescue. When America swore it would never send in special operations again blind, they needed a unit that could see literally everything. Gray Fox flew ghost planes over the jungles of El Salvador, snatching guerrilla radio chatter out of thin air before the enemy even knew anyone was listening. They hunted the most feared drug lord on earth, Pablo Escobar, pinpointing his phone signals until the net finally closed around him in Colombia. They were in the issue, the eyes in the storm during the brutal firefight the world would come to know as Black Hawk Down. They stalked war criminals throughout the shattered Balkans, turning whispers into coordinates. And after 9/11, they vanished into Afghanistan and Iraq, the invisible hand behind the hunt for terrorists, helping run down targets like Zarqawi himself. Now, if you know anything about the UFO crash retrieval program, it's rumored to be closely coordinated with JSOC, or the Joint Special Operations Command, which is the umbrella organization, again, that Gray Fox sits with him. If this is true, Gray Fox would be one of the first lines of defense for UFO crashables globally. Maybe it's not a coincidence then that former American alchemist and the UFO whistleblower responsible for that 2017 New York Times article, who also fired a lot of modern disclosure, is a guy named Lou Elizondo. Lou's been a past guest on the show, as he'll be the first one to admit. Lou is definitely sitting on more sensitive UFO-related information than he relays in general interviews.
I
get the sense that you're sitting on things that feel like very hard truths.
Time is not a luxury that we can afford.
And you see, Lou Elizondo is an alumni of Gray Fox. So we have two pretty interesting data points. Gray Fox does recon and goes into the most sensitive areas before JSOC does. And we know that JSOC probably has something to do with UFOs. And Lou Elizondo, a man who seems to know a lot more than he can say about UFOs, used to work there. Another entity, this time a private company, located in Northern Virginia, is Science Applications and Integration Study, also known as SAIC and headquartered in Reston, North Virginia. SAIC has openly studied exotic propulsion, anti-gravity, directed energy, and other exotic science. They also seem to work hand in hand with Stargate, the CIA's psychic spy program. Finally, former NSA director Bobby Ryan, who's openly spoken about UFOs to researcher Bobby Oxler on a phone call, was on the board of SAIC.
Do you anticipate that any of the recovered vehicles would ever become available for technological research?
10 years ago, the answer would have been no.
Yeah.
Whether as time has evolved, they're beginning to become more open on it, is a possibility.
The former head of the All-Domain Anomalies Resolution Office, or AARO, the official Pentagon UFO investigating group, also used to work at SAIC, Sean Kirkpatrick. I have no idea if Gray Fox and SAIC work together. It would likely be pretty classified and off the books if they did. But it's my belief that Gray Fox probably uses remote viewing as an intelligence modality. If you're going into the most sensitive areas on Earth, why wouldn't you? And if any of this UFO crash retrieval stuff is real, of course you'd use remote viewing on it. And SAIC, being the inheritors of the CIA's best remote viewing protocols, makes them a great candidate for consulting with Gray Fox. The fact that they're a private contractor also makes them not subject to Freedom of Information Act requests for, say, UFO material. Again, sounds a lot like Wardex. And remember, in the movie, Wardex uses remote viewing regularly. Noah Scanlan, played by Colin Firth, is the sinister leader of Wardex, and he regularly remote views, or as he calls it, dives, to figure out what they're up to. Some depictions of remote viewing are accurate down to a T. For example, when Colin Firth remote views a subject, his eyes change color to match theirs, almost inhabiting the body of the person or thing he's remote viewing. Top government spy Lynn Buchanan said that's happened to him before on my show.
Your eyes turned to the same color as Saddam.
That's what she said. That's what she told me, yeah.
So it was like you were merging with him.
Merging, sort of, yeah.
Wow. And speaking of UFO legacy program gatekeepers, Noah Scanlan looks like the spitting image of former CIA Director of Science and Technology Glenn Gaffney, who many on my show have accused of running the entire UFO program. In fact, journalist George Knapp even testified to Congress, saying that Gaffney was personally responsible for blocking the transfer of UFO materials from Lockheed Martin to Bigelow Aerospace in 2008.
Glenn Gaffney, CIA.
Glenn Gaffney, CIA.
Number 2, the Majestic 12 and Deep State Timeline Wars.
Ya publicaste algunos libros en Amazon, no ves resultados. No eres el único. La mayoría hace lo mismo. Publican, esperan.
I want to take a moment to thank one of my favorite new products and today's sponsor, Cape. Cape is America's privacy-first mobile carrier. It offers the same reliable thought.
Right along.
American
commercials.
In our years, technologies as tagalongs. These are the kinds of plot isn't just a voice recorder or an always come back to later. Okay. Pro is better for more deliberate recordings, meetings, and digging through old. Welcome me for sponsoring today's episode. Number 2, the Majestic 12 and Deep State Timeline Wars. Hugo Wakefield isn't the only defector from Vortex. 12 in total left, including someone named Nathan Twining. Twining is a play on the head of Air Material Command for the Air Force in the 40s, the man responsible for all aircraft development back then. His real name was Nathan Twining. He was also one of the first head honchos in the federal government to begin to take UFOs seriously. After Roswell and the famous sighting of pilot Kenneth Arnold months earlier, he wrote the famous Twining Memo on UFOs in 1947, a letter that's become canonical in UFO lore because he openly says that these aerial objects aren't visionary or fictitious. What may also not be fictitious is the Majestic 12 Committee he was rumored to be appointed to by President Truman, an elite group of scientists, military officials who directly advised the president on UFOs. Remember that Hollywood liaison, Chase Brandon? Well, he wrote a book called Crypto's Conundrum, and in it was a committee that sounded exactly like Majestic 12. Brandon starts the book with the Francis Bacon quote, "Truth is so hard to tell that sometimes it needs fiction to make it plausible." This committee that sent Majestic 12 had access to a sacred object, similar to the device in Disclosure Day. But in this case, it was a crystal tablet that gave them access to reading future timelines. When I interviewed the eminent statesman and White House advisor Harold Malmgren, this is what he had to say about the Majestic 12, who he believed was tracking him personally.
Your name is all the important talent.
That who keeps?
CIA.
Wow.
Not only all the Majestic, all the Guardians, they also have themselves to protect the world.
Malmgren held pieces of a UFO in his hands, directly given to him by head of the Albuquerque branch of the Atomic Energy Commission and the eventual founder of DARPA, Lawrence Preston Geiss, who also happens to be Jeff Bezos' maternal grandfather.
Wow, that's amazing.
These are things that have come up.
Malmgren's life feels led by synchronicities, dealing with higher ups. People like his mentor, Richard Bissell, who founded Area 51 and was deputy director of the CIA. These synchronicities seem to lead Malmgren to the ultimate disclosures he made at the end of life, similar to Daniel and Margaret. In Crypto's Conundrum, this Majestic 12-like committee is brought together by synchronicities and by beings that seem to know more about the individual members of this committee than they know about each other. In our interview, Malmgren made it clear he had a very important but almost hermetic purpose. And when I asked him about the existence of a time-traveling intelligence agency, completely embarrassing myself in front of their statesmen, he went silent.
If you ask me, did I have a purpose? Yes.
Now, the Majestic 12 was most famously written about a series of documents anonymously dropped in the hands of various UFO researchers throughout the 80s and 90s. I personally think any of these documents were created by longtime CIA counterintelligence agent James G. Angleton, able to catch Soviet spies. A lot of them is seductively adjacent to truth rather than true or false at times. But there are things about the documents that line up with real historical dates. For example, the Forrestal Memo was the from Truman, the Defense Secretary James Forrestal, dated September 24, 1947, him and Vannevar Bush to proceed with creating the Majestic 12. Like UFO researcher Stanton Friedman anchored this to real history, that the first National Security Council meeting was held September 26, 1947, and it involved grouped Truman, Forrestal, Sowers, and Hillenkoetter. It dates perfectly with the document's own time for the Majestic 12's establishment. And the Majestic 12 documents are the first to reveal that meeting. The other thing I'd say is if UFOs are real, and by God, it really seems are at this point with all of these dark word drops, whistleblowers, evidence we're not getting, then of course you set up an advisory panel. And the people on the Majestic 12 documents list would be your top candidates. According to Chase Brandon, this committee or group was way more than a run-of-the-mill advisory panel, thinking about cosmic scale problems. Think Philip K. Dick's adjustment team, which spawned the Matt Damon movie, The Adjustment Bureau. Intelligence operatives that have the power to change variables in reality itself in order to alter timelines. Again, this theme shows up in real modern UFO history. The book I can't recommend enough, especially to the mystics out there, and deeper threads of modern ufology, is Diana Pasulka's American Cosmic. One of the primary sources for that book is NASA mission controller and NRO operative Tim Taylor. In the book, Pasulka claims that Taylor was part of a secret program involving UFOs, but when she really pressed in his job, he said it involved adjusting timelines, like the movie The Adjustment Bureau.
When I knew Tyler, he was always talking about time travel. And
really?
Yeah, whenever a new movie about time travel came out, he would go see it.
Like The Adjustment Bureau.
Yeah, he loved it. Yeah.
That's fascinating. He relayed the same thing to UFO super experiencer Chris Bledsoe. Taylor also told Bledsoe's son, Ryan, that he was part of a secret time travel group and that mid-century event for Thomas Townsend Brown was the bit of it. A statement on review from Townsend Brown's daughter on Tim Taylor's obscure autobiography. This book, Launch Fever, was written almost 15 years before Diana Pasulka's American Cosmic had ever been written. So it does seem like there's a connection between Townsend Brown and Tim Taylor. If you read Townsend Brown's biography, The Man Who Mastered Gravity by Paul Shatskin, Brown's constantly saying that his time travel technology was taken by a group in Nassau, Bahamas, and his daughter is on record remembering him frequently going to the Bahamas alongside Churchill's super spy and the inspiration of James Bond, Stevenson. Lo and behold, Tim Taylor's autobiography is full of Bahamas, where he cryptically writes that time moved differently. Anyways, we are going deep down a rabbit hole now that is going to be very hard to get out of if we don't stop now. But the point is, these intelligence sections, a deep state war, if you will, related to time, isn't just in UFO fiction. It comes up in real UFO research. Of course, we can't research at face value, but it is a very real fact pattern that we have to contend. There's also a Netflix show called Dark, and according to Jay Anderson at Project Unity, a senior member of the American intelligence community told him that the show almost perfectly encapsulates the true UFO program. In the show, there are two warring factions in the deep state who can both manipulate timelines, and they each want diametrically opposed things. One wants disclosure, representing blips in the show, attempting to accelerate or hasten it, and the other wants to hold things back or deter it. So you have these groups deep in intelligence, almost architecting reality. In Disclosure Day, Hugo Wakefield is pulling the strings on the Majestic 12 side of things. Fittingly, he's calling all the shots and calling Daniel and Margaret in a staging room for sets. He's wearing a headset and on the phone with both protagonists while he's directing set designers in the background. It's as if he's manipulating reality itself. And he literally tells Daniel and Margaret they are just hapless passengers in their lives who must have faith in his plans for them. He gets them out of some pretty tight spots, always adjusting the minimal amount of variables for them to survive, acting with complete faith they will, engineering synchronicities and timelines while debating Colin Firth's character Noah, his arch nemesis leading Wardex, who is actively trying to deter disclosure. In an emotional plea to him, Wakefield points out that Scanlan's stated reason for holding disclosure back, social stability and the idea that people can't handle the truth, is just a cover for protecting the rich and powerful. So again, the Society in Disclosure Day is one in which remote viewing, psi wars, and timeline manipulation are occurring at the highest level, and all terrestrial politics exists downstream of that. Fittingly, in the opening scene of the movie, Daniel and his Ward X captors are at a wrestling match. Everyone is waving American flags and wearing American flag hats. This symbolizes the charade that is modern politics and the deeper wars going on behind the scenes.
You're saying the person is a storage mechanism
and can walk right through any security system undetected, is carrying all that information in the DNA of a human.
Whoa, it's just fascinating. So it's almost like we're walking hard drives or something.
Number 4, humans as walking hard drives and encrypted puzzle pieces. Margaret Fairchild, Emily Blunt's character, is the right brain, pure empathy. Daniel is the left brain, pure logic, math, and reasoning. Together, they are encoded with cryptographic messages downloaded into them when they were abducted aliens as kids. They were lured out of their respective bedrooms by a troop of friendly-looking animals. Hansel and Gretel is used as an analogy for these abductions, which it also is, interestingly, by UFO researcher Carla Turner. In her mind, aliens often presented a friendly veneer for a more sinister motive. In this case, the aliens' motive wasn't sinister at all. They imprinted a message in both to be decoded when the time was right. Had they not been compartmentalized from their own message, they may have acted too early on it, or rashly, or may not have properly integrated the information.
Where do you think of past civilization? If they're trying to make themselves known, what do you think they would do? Leave something in a Lagrangian point?
Well, that's a great question, isn't it? If you were going to make something truly enduring, there's really only 2 ways to do it. You either put something out in deep space, where the chances are of it coming into contact with something are minimal, or biology, genetics. Because genetics is a fingerprint, and that will continue as long as the species survives and finds another place to live. So will that message. And you can put a lot. And the beauty about DNA is that it's self-replicates.
Hugo Wakefield, along with acting as a sort of majestic 12 architect, also plays the role of Harvard psychiatrist John Mack. In the 90s, Mack would use holotropic breathwork and hypnosis to recover the abduction memories of his patients. In this case, he aids in Margaret in recreating Margaret's childhood home experience for alien encounter and experience noesis, knowledge of her true soul self and her purpose on Earth, the key to fulfilling her purpose and her disclosure mission. Now, this part in speculation. We basically know that this whole scene is inspired by real hypnotic regressions executed by people like John Mack. Because Coleman Domingo, who plays Hugo Wakefield, basically admitted that. But here's where I'm going to speculate even more. Margaret's psychic powers are reactivated in her apartment. Cardinal. Now, I could be completely off base here, but I think Red Cardinal is actually an homage to the CIA's Project Bluebird, which for its mind control efforts in what became MK-Ultra. Bluebird gets its name from Maurice Maeterlinck's 1908 play, Bluebird. The play, like Hansel and Gretel, revolves around 2 children searching for the bluebird of happiness, questing for answers and moving through shadow realms and encountering fantastical and sometimes scary ones along the way. Former American alchemist Kira Lavender finds it meaningful in its hidden esoteric structure. On the surface, it's a children's fairy tale. Instead of finding the bluebird of happiness, every bird they catch escapes, changes color, or dies. They wake up on Christmas morning, back in their own cottage, and discover that their own pet turtle dove had been blue all along. The moral, like Siddhartha or the alchemist, is that happiness isn't found in distant and exotic place. It's been at home all along. This also encapsulates the UFO. Searching for the alien artifacts and UFO crash retrievals are ingredients for disappointment. Lavenda says that the whole play is an initiatory process, like a Masonic initiation laid out in dramatic form. He says it's a coded ritual of consciousness transformation, which is precisely why he finds its connection to a consciousness-altering CIA program significant rather than coincidental. Number 5, let's get into some real UFO crashes depicted in this movie. In Disclosure Day, they show video of the Roswell wreckage and a Kecksburg UFO crash. I will say that the craft at Kecksburg in the movie was incorrectly portrayed as a flying saucer, when in reality it was shaped like a bell or acorn. The aliens here are also typical grays, which Bud Hopkins even said Spielberg based off of real experience or testimonies for Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Collection of drawings very similar to these that date from actually back into the late 60s and early 70s that Dr. Alan Hynek handed to Spielberg to use for his special effects. So those figures in that movie were based on accurate UFO research.
I think Roswell and Kecksburg crash happened, and I won't get too deep into corroborating Roswell because honestly that deserves its own video. But Army Intelligence Officer Jessee Marcel held the wreckage in his hands, even showing it to his son. We even have a possible piece from the crash, which is made of bismuth, a very important material for anti-gravity experiments. Go check out my episode with Thomas Townsend Brown and my interview with Bob if you want to know more about that.
You said bismuth seemed to have come up, like that was something.
There's something about bismuth.
But I actually looked at one of these alleged Roswell pieces with Stanford professor Gary Nolan. And the godfather of UFO science himself, Hal Puthoff, called in to tell us about the piece's origins.
The story was that it was sent anonymously by someone claiming to be an Army officer, and written in the diary was that it was a piece from Roswell.
The Roswell film depicted in Disclosure Day is pretty explicit and intense. You see an injured alien. Was Spielberg going off of any tips he got from the inside?
I had to base our alien people have reported who claim to have had close encounters of the third kind.
The movie also says that the Kecksburg crash cleanup was overseen by a civilian. This civilian is likely Dr. Eric Walker, alleged Majestic 12 member and president of Penn State. When UFO researcher Bill Simon directly asked Walker about the Majestic 12, he said he'd known about them for decades. He also told Steinman that because he didn't understand extrasensory perception, he was going to be chasing his tail. The truth is more about a person's orientation towards the truth. It's not about learning a little piece of information. Walker was executive secretary of the Research and Development Board in the 1950s. In the 60s, his Ordnance Research Laboratory at Penn State did Navy underwater acoustics and weapons work. And as a university president, he continued to sit on numerous federal science and defense advisory bodies. But he was technically just a civilian, and a civilian rumored to oversee the Kecksburg crash retrieval in 1965. Penn State was just a 2.5-hour drive away from the crash.
The folks we look in now on The Honeymooners are played by Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows.
Number 6, Joe Rogan's favorite apocryphal UFO story might be true.
Nixon and Jackie Gleason were drinking, and they were having a good old time, and Nixon was like, "You want to see some shit? And I want to show you a UFO."
This is the full story. Picture Jackie Gleason at the height of his fame. The Honeymooners, and away we go, the biggest grin in America. But behind the showman was a man with an obsession that bordered on religious. By 1973, Gleason had built a house in Peekskill, New York, shaped like a flying saucer. He called it the Mothership, with curved walls and a UFO library running to 1,700 books. He'd later subscribed to the UFO secrecy newsletter, Just Cause, published by Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. This a bit, the funniest man in America genuinely believed we were not alone, and he wanted, more than almost anything, to know. Enter Richard Nixon. The two were genuine friends, golf partners, guard companions. Glee had been a long-time Nixon supporter, and here's the one piece of this story that is rock-solid documented fact. On February 19th, 1973, Nixon met Gleason on the 18th green of a Florida golf course. Everything after this is where history ends and legend begins. As the story goes, Nixon allegedly turned up at Gleason's door with no Secret Service present. The two men supposedly drove through the night to Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. Armed guards escorted Gleason to a building in a remote part of the base. Inside, the legend turns genuine. Gleason described going into an inner chamber where there were 6 or 8 what looked like glass-topped Coke freezers, and inside them there were mangled remains he first took to be the bodies of children. Then the initial horror clarified itself. They were the embalmed bodies of 4 small alien beings, about 2 feet long, with small bald heads and big ears. This is the emotional core, and it's the detail that's launched 1,000 retellings. Gleason's wife Beverly said that around 11:30 p.m. that night, her husband came home, slumped white-faced into an armchair, and finally blurted, "I've been at Homestead Air Force Base, and I've seen the bodies of some aliens from outer space. It's time. Only a few people know, but the present for me to be escorted in there and see them." The man who made a nation laugh sat in the living room, rattled to his core. Gleason swore Beverly to secrecy, but here's where it gets very human. The marriage didn't last. After their divorce, Beverly, now Beverly McKittrick, freely discussed the story. And in 1983, she took it to a tabloid. She gave the interview to the National Enquirer, claiming the events happened on February 1973, recounting exactly what told her. She'd reportedly written a whole saga up in an unpublished manuscript about Gleason called The Great One.
If you're so profitable, why do you know what? Here, I don't care. It's all free. I'm giving.
All.
Who knows if this story is true? It's certainly a weird chain of destiny. But Spielberg depicted all of it, down to the core details, in Disclosure Day. Maybe Trump will treat Rogan to a modern Jackie Gleason experience and show him the goods. Number 7. The movie accurately portrays UFO science. When Margaret Wakefield finishes her regression, Vortex starts to close in on her, Daniel, and Hugo. So she grabs hold of the device, which turns her entire house and everything in it into a flaming little firecracker floating in the air. The holographic principle is that the lower dimensional boundary, like a 2D visible black hole, can encode the 3D information about it. This principle is often alluded to by UFO whistleblowers like David Grush.
It could be that this is not necessarily extraterrestrial and it's actually coming from a higher dimensional physical space that might be co-located right here.
It seems like UFOs are rendered in 3D reality, but are coming from higher dimensional space, just like Margaret, Hugo, and Daniel collapsing into a little firecracker. In other cases, UFOs are often seen as 3D objects that are windows into even higher dimensional space we can't conceive of.
I cannot show you a tesseract because I and you are trapped in 3 dimensions. But what I can show you is the shadow in 3 dimensions of a 4-dimensional hypercube or tesseract. This is
Jacques Vallée even discusses a case in San Jose that's typical of this holographic experience, where the UFO appeared much smaller on the outside than it ended up being on the inside.
When you went inside, you said, there was this being, and the being took you on a staircase. I said, where did the staircase go? Well, the stairs went up the side of this big round room. I say, how would you compare it to this? Well, like a movie house, like an amphitheater. I said, that's bigger than your house. Why is the inside bigger than the outside?
UFOs and aliens also seem to engage in something called signature management. Basically, they can completely manipulate our perception of them.
Different forms and maybe different sources.
Mm-hmm.
These days, since our technology platforms are so high to generate effects, and our detection platforms are so well advanced, so we could see a lot more.
And that's exactly what Margaret Fairchild does to escape Vortex. She shows up as past ones in their lives. She even turns into Noah Scanlan's ex-wife. In other words, she shapeshifts and she weaponizes her empathy. There's a recurring trope in the movie that you can't quote-unquote dive on an experience, or you can't remote view them. It is too specific to have not come from an inside source. There's also a fascinating and clear deliberate discrepancy between the Disclosure Day trailer and what ends up being the cut in the movie. The discrepancy that possibly implies that there are a billion people on Earth that aren't actually people.
The line in the trailer was 7 billion people have the right to know the truth.
Which set everybody up. People were saying either they don't know how many people are unlikely, or maybe it doesn't take place in the present, or maybe a billion or alien hybrid or whatever. But isn't it interesting? It's in the trailer, and then it's not in the movie.
The final piece of truth in Disclosure Day has been speculated on by UFO researchers Ramsey, and it's a super fascinating question we all have to ask. What real piece of physical evidence, material from a craft, a video, or a photo, UFO, or an alien being in this V that was actually real? This would be impossible to deduce, especially in the closing montage, in which all of Wardex's UFO evidence gets aired live on Margaret Fairchild's cable news show. There are so many wild photos and videos of UFO crashes, alien bodies getting inspected, those caught on imaging, flying in V formation and diving underwater. Most of these photos and videos look pretty ably fake. Were any of them actual UFO material shown in the movie? And it would be a pretty reasonable reward for America's preeminent alien movie director, who has clearly released a lot of truth in fiction in the past.
I think the public's urge to know is more like a right to know. UFology could be considered by some mythology, but when you look at the consistency of the reporting, how it's so consistent for 80 years, I am on much firmer ground now, certainly, for me to believe that, they're here.
So maybe they gave Spielberg access to the goods while making his ultimate capstone movie. Disclosure Day started production in February of 2025, just a few months after the crazy New Jersey drones flap of UFOs being seen across the state.
The drone drama continues as more sightings reported over the weekend across our area.
And the movie was filmed in Morris County, New Jersey, probably only a half-hour drive from Picatinny Arsenal, where a lot of the first UFOs were seen. As you know from previous interviews we've done, UFOs often show up during exotic science experimentation, but also during the handling or transport of UFO material. This was just a few months before the filming of Disclosure Day. Did that movement cause the Jersey drone UFO flap?
Officials with the Federal Aviation Administration told Pix 11 News it received no reports of unusual activity for the area.
Future American alchemist and News Nation reporter Rob Jones has a very interesting theory. He thinks that the Lockheed Martin UFO that was gonna get transferred to Bigelow Aerospace in 2008, but was actually blocked by the CIA, ended up at Picatinny Arsenal in New Jersey.
I believe the company that currently hold that material is a company by the name of Periton.
Okay.
Periton Labs, one of their subsidiaries.
Okay. Where are they based?
New Jersey.
Whoa, which is where the Disclosure Day Spielberg stuff is being filmed.
Yeah, but it's also where the drone flap
It's also where the drone flap happened, yeah.
Right, and they have offices at Picatinny Arsenal.
Whoa! Crazy.
Yes.
Okay, so there you have it. All of the possible truths hiding in plain sight in Disclosure Day. There are other more obvious overlaps with reality, like depicting a world on the brink of World War III, searching for meaning amidst the decline of religion, experiencers struggling with their past and struggling to interact with normies, as you see with Margaret and her boyfriend, and the use of decommissioned Air Force bases as UFO legacy program operations. But this is the list that I thought was most mind-blowing and crosses over with hardcore UFO research that we and others in the space have done. Sadly, Steven Spielberg has turned down an interview with American Alchemy, so we will never get a chance to fully nerd out on UFOs with him, unless one of you in the audience happens to be connected with him and wants to advocate. But regardless, he should be celebrated and congratulated for a legendary, and in my opinion, very deep movie. His ultimate message is that in a fragmented world of miscommunication, strife, and chaos, listening and being receptive is what will keep us alive, and what will allow us to ontological shock of the truth when the truth does arrive. That's probably something we can all agree on, that in the age of everyone having a digital soapbox, shouting on social media, and believing they are worthy of philosophical axioms on Twitter and other platforms, we could all use a little humility, a little quiet, and genuine intake of each other's points of views. If there is a prime directive and the aliens are waiting for certain conditions to arrive and interact with humanity, I'd think that that might be one of them. The final question this movie asks is, what side will you choose? Uncomfortable truth or convenience? Individual enlightenment or institutional stability? Self-interest or that of the whole? That is perhaps the most real thing about this entire movie. The choice is yours and all of ours. Until next time, my name is Jesse Michels, and this is American Alchemy.
If you don't follow Jesse Michels, you totally should. He's turned philosophical on us, but I appreciate his deep research, his deep insight, his knowledge, just his wealth of knowledge that he actually shares. And then, of course, the insights and perspectives that he has. I really appreciate those. He's quickly become my favorite. Okay, so we're gonna switch over to Hyperbeam just because I do want to start watching the Dark series. I've heard of this series already, so I'm gonna try to find that for us real quick, and then we'll move over to Hyperbeam. So I'll play a little music, and then I'll end this one, and then see you on Hyperbeam. Thank you so much for tuning in, and of course, I'll see you next time.